Hello everyone and welcome to the studio. Today I've got an interview with a young artist named Normandy Poulter. And one reason I was very excited to share her experience with you is that she's part of the upcoming generation of young artists, and in the techniques that she uses and the way her artwork is being used in places like Scripture Central and other shows on YouTube. So enjoy. Well, hi everybody. I'm here with Normandy Poulter, and even though she's from Utah, she is living currently in Wisconsin, where I am. She is a young artist, and I was so excited that she was going to take a little time to talk to us about her journey in art, and in particular her journey in religious art. So, Normandy, tell me, when were you first interested in art?
For as long as I can remember. I have one memory specifically. I came home from kindergarten and I had drawn this picture of a dragon, which it's like a kindergarten picture of a dragon. If most people looked at it, they'd be like, "Oh, what even is that?" But because my dad was an artist, he could tell I was trying some things with perspective that were tricky for a 5-year-old, as seen in the picture. Anyways, he gave me a lot of praise for it, and I loved art, and my grandpa also was an artist and also gave me a lot of praise for it. So some of it was just wanting to make them proud. I look up to them a lot. But more than that, I just always have felt like this was what I was going to do with my life. I only applied to BYU because I knew I was going to do the illustration program there. I considered one other school slightly that also had an art program that I was interested in, but it wasn't until I was in school.
Was it BYU for the illustration program, or was there another? Yeah? Okay.
I mean, honestly, part of it was because I knew I was doing art, and BYU was a lot cheaper. It was one of the top art schools in the country, and I wasn't necessarily ready to draw nudes, and you didn't have to at BYU. So I was like, that's it.
Perfect
I'm going
program.
there. Yeah, perfect program. So, yeah.
So what did you want to do with your art?
What did I want? That's a great question. I had no idea. So, and that was actually some of what I was telling you before, where people would be like, "What are you going to do with art?" And I was like, "I don't know." Because honestly, I always knew I would do art, in school, in college. And I always saw myself doing religious paintings after I retired. But being a full-time mom, that was kind of my plan. So obviously that's not what has happened. There's no world in which I was like, yeah, I'll actually be making this into a career and supporting myself. I thought it would be the perfect thing to go into school, and then if we needed some supplementary something, I could work from home.
Sure.
But yeah, that became a big question, the longer I was in school, and the more people were like, how are you going to make that work? And I was like, I don't know. And also dating was going nowhere, and I was like, how am I going to make this work? Because I was making it work. I was supporting myself, doing graphic design and illustration in college. So I was
Well, tell me how you got started doing that as a job.
My dad was a graphic designer. So my dad and my grandpa both did illustration at BYU. So that's another reason why that was on the brain. So we had Photoshop and Illustrator on our home computers because he worked from home. So a true 90s kid, I would play computer games. But also I would just play on Photoshop and Illustrator. That was what I liked to do in my spare time. So I think I started doing I think my dad probably did pay me a little bit, but I started doing stuff with my dad with graphic design for like banners or flyers or logos and things. When I was young, I probably in junior high or high school. And then I did a lot of that. My dad ended up teaching art at my high school, and he ran it like a business. He taught graphic design. I actually didn't take as many art classes in high school because I knew I was doing it in college, and because I was also would some summers like do art stuff with my grandpa. So I actually did a lot more music, extracurricular music in high school because I was like, this is my window to do that. But I did do graphic design with my dad, and he ran that class kind of like a business. So we would do the signage and like t-shirts and stuff for all of the extracurricular groups at school.
So by the time you were done with high school, you
Yeah, I
had a
had a
pretty good working
portfolio.
knowledge of Illustrator and Photoshop,
Yeah,
right?
I had like I had like more than intermediate knowledge. Yeah, of that. And I
start.
had like a good portfolio. So it was like, I mean, I was working campus jobs, but they were the higher paying campus jobs, which was nice because campus jobs didn't quite pay minimum wage on some of them. So,
Well,
that was
so you were
nice.
doing graphic design, but you're doing illustration now,
Right.
too.
Yeah. I
So,
didn't want to do graphic design.
okay. Had you
So-
done it enough in high school to know that wasn't the direction you wanted to go?
You know, I don't know why I knew that wasn't the direction. There are some decisions in life that I have just known in my gut, and every time I've like sat down to say a prayer about it to like clarify or like be like, is this what I actually should do? The spirits, I was like, you already know. Why are you asking me? Like, just go do it. And this was one of them. It was like illustration specifically, like not graphic design. And I think it probably is because graphic design's a lot more, I feel like it'll lead you more toward marketing. And I knew I wanted to tell stories. And so I think I was also very inspired by film as a kid. Like I loved Disney, and part of me like really wanted to work for Disney. Part of me also really wanted to do spiritual stuff, but I felt torn because I didn't want to like, when you bear your testimony is like a really special thing, and I feel like there can be the temptation to try to draw people to you. Because like I grew up in Utah, so being spiritual, that kind of stuff was praised and like,
It's in the culture.
yeah, it's in the like and rewarded, and it's you're not weird for it. People are like, oh yeah, you're a great person for this, you know. So trying to make sure that after you like bear your testimony, you keep that you're drawing people to Christ and not like let that get into your head, slip into priestcraft or whatever, like where you're drawing people to you instead. Like I just was nervous that if I did spiritual work for pay, that would be too much for me to try to in addition to people being like, wow, you have such a great testimony, having praise coming, also being like, I need to earn money from this and trying to push my testimony out to people to market it. Like that was, I knew I wanted to share my testimony through art, but I don't know. So I did want to do spiritual artwork, but I felt weird pursuing it as a career.
A lot of people have that. I think I certainly did. I think one of the most helpful things that somebody told me is when you go into the church bookstore, do you have any problem paying for people's stuff? Oh, no, I'm happy to. I'd love to, I'd rather it exist. And so that was a good thing to think about. That if it's valuable to me, it's valuable to others as well. And
yeah, and I knew that, like, I was like, obviously this is a good thing. I'm so glad people do that. It was just, I guess finding that balance within myself and knowing that I guess I just wanted to be cautious in how I proceeded.
I get it.
With that.
I get it.
Yeah.
So when and why did you start doing religious subjects?
was just always the thing.
Just kept coming back to it?
It just was always yeah. And well, also, I mean, those were the projects I was interested in, right? Like one of the first, I mean, when I was doing things like in high school, it was more graphic design, but I did occasionally do some illustration stuff. It was usually church related or like school related, but because that was, the community and the culture. But it was also, those were typically the projects I was more interested in. Like I took a Book of Mormon class from Tyler Griffin, who, and he like talked about his Book of Mormon map and stuff that he was working on with, what is now Scripture Central, right? That's their name now. And I was like so floored about it. And I went up to him after class and was like, I'd love to help with this. In my mind thinking as an after school club or something. I don't know if Tyler knows that, but he offered me a job. And so I was like, okay, like I'll do that. And then there was another professor who he was working on a book. It was Don Perry. I don't know if you know him. He's a family friend.
Nice.
He's great. But he was working on a book and needed a couple illustrations. Like just, like that's where my connections were, and those were the projects I was most interested in, because it turns out I was like a spiritual person. So
it's such a wonderful way to bear your testimony and to share your testimony. Do you remember what your first religious subject is that you illustrated?
Like for me personally?
Yeah.
No, I don't remember.
Well, you've got some stuff that we're going to take a look at in just a minute, and I'd love to have you talk about. But is there a project, say, in the Book of Mormon, but it could be, any of the standard works, that if you could, you had all the time and resources in the world, is there something you'd really love to do an illustration or a painting of?
Oh. I'm torn. Part of me wants to do one of the less well-known stories, because that's a really fun thing about illustration, is to shed light on something that maybe was stuck in the corners of your mind, but that you couldn't see as well, or just shift your paradigm about something. But if you were like, go now, do it right now, the thing I'd feel the most comfortable, and like probably the stories that I'm empathizing with the most at the moment are Nephi, partially because we're reading it right now, but also like there's some elements of his journey that have been resonating with me a lot recently. And always the brother of Jared, because I love that one.
Well, let's take a look at that piece now. Have you got that on your...
Maybe I should send
Well, at the time of this recording, this piece was used in the Liahona in January for the First Presidency message.
This one was one of the first ones I did for Tyler Griffin and Scripture Central. Not one of the first pictures I did. I did a lot of stuff with them, but they asked me to do a series of pieces for the Scriptures Plus app, or at least that's what it was called at the time, to have a picture for each book heading, or each book in the Book of Mormon, and then maybe a couple in addition. And so I started with Ether because I love that book, and it was like the easiest for me to just go with. And yeah, this one just kind of came together. The other ones were harder for me, but...
Well, so tell me a little bit about this piece.
I think for whatever reason I really wanted to depict, in some ways it was like strategic not to try to depict God. That's just like, seems crazy. And I feel like a lot of times things like that are so sacred are better left to your imagination anyways, and your own, to keep some of that covered, I guess, for the viewer to insert their own experience with God there instead of showing you exactly how I see God. But the feeling after, like I feel like I've had many experiences with the Spirit where getting there is such a labor and such a wrestle. But like the feeling after, was it Joseph Smith talking about after the first vision how he was filled with the love of God for several days afterward? Like I feel like there's this high of like God's there, he's with me, like everything's gonna be great, and it's just like this really, high is not even a good word for it, but it's just feeling just encircled with God's love, and it's the moment right after the prayer, and that was, for whatever reason, that was like what I wanted to capture in the Brother of Jared. And I think the other reason too was I looked up some of the other images on the Brother of Jared, and they're always like showing the stones, but no one was showing like how the Brother of Jared felt about it. And I think that's the more vulnerable moment. Like we all know what happened, but how you felt about it is usually more interesting to me than like what happened to you. Does that make sense?
Well, and it's such a neat vision. I've certainly never thought of telling the story that way. To have that glow you're talking about after that spiritual high, after that transcendent moment, and it's represented by these stones that God has just touched. And so you have such a joyful, peaceful expression on the Brother of Jared as he's clutching these symbols of the miracle that just happened.
Yeah.
It's a great idea.
Yeah. Yep, it just worked out.
Did you start with thumbnails? From a technical standpoint, how did you lay this out? Or did you just already have figured out the composition you wanted?
So this picture I drew a long time ago. I don't really remember. I think, I'm not sure if I started with thumbnails. I probably did. I used, for these in particular, like all of these in this Book of Mormon series, I used a lot of, we didn't have much time. They were aiming for like 10 hours per image, and I was not skilled enough to do that. So I did a lot of like, I would do a thumbnail, and then I would take some pictures and like do Google searches and like Photoshop it all together and then paint over the top in correct lighting. Because I told you I like played on Photoshop as a kid.
Sure.
So that was like more in my wheelhouse. Looking back, I think it was okay. There's one image where one of the guy's faces is too close to the reference that I used it from, and that's always kind of bugged me.
Okay.
Because I'm like, I don't know if that was okay. But
well, that's such an interesting lighting scheme, though, that it seems like it would be hard to find references that you could use there.
The guy who I used for this, well, it was like, I think it was like 3 guys and my hands.
Okay.
Like,
did you have something
like
glowing in the hands,
together.
or were you just?
No, I just like held stuff, and then so the lighting was terrible. It was like all different. Honestly, it's a terrible way to do pictures. I don't recommend it. You can see if you like watch for it that that's how I was making these images. But so I looked up other pictures with the lighting that I knew that I wanted to kind of like intuit how the lighting would work on this guy in this scenario, and then used the like piece together photos as my underdrawing, because I wasn't there with my drawing skills to be able to do that realistic of a painting like what they wanted. So
I have to tell you that I depend on setting up the models and the reference lighting and all that kind of stuff very accurately, and taking photographs for reference and so forth. But that's a luxury. And when you've got illustration jobs and you've only got so much time,
right.
You've got to just make it work. But I think it's a wonderful color scheme, and it's just got a wonderful mood to it. I love it.
Thank you.
So do you have some other pieces that you might like to share?
Yes, I happened to bring other pieces with me.
Would you, pray tell us about these and and
Yeah.
show us?
This was one that I did for, my parents actually wrote a book about Adam and Eve, and they asked me to do some images for it.
Well, it's
So-
absolutely gorgeous, and it looks like real pencil. I'm going to guess it's not.
No, it's not.
Digital to look like pencil.
Yeah, I very intentionally, I started school and went, I don't have a studio. I don't know where I'm going to be living for the next who knows how long. Like the most sustainable way to do this and the cheapest way to do this is to get an iPad and see if I can just use an iPad and not a computer for all of school. And so that's what I did. And
It really looks like
Yeah.
pencil. I mean, it's really convincing.
yeah,
But beautiful. Love the rim lighting in there. Just a beautiful, beautiful moment. Anything you want to say about the piece? Anything that inspired you, or?
I don't know. I love Adam and Eve, heavenly parents. Nope, I guess I don't have anything I want to say.
Well, I'm going to pull something out of you. If you're going to represent heavenly parents, and you just talked about how difficult it is to even want to represent God, and I have felt the
And
same
then I
way.
just did it.
Yes, you did. I felt the same way, and even when I was a little kid, I would never draw faces on like Heavenly Father or Jesus if I drew them. It just was too intimidating to me. But I love it when other people do. I have no problem with that. I just feel overwhelmed by the task. So when you're going to put the idea of heavenly parents ghosted behind Adam and Eve, what characteristics are you looking for?
Because this was for somebody else, they had more input on what the things were that we were kind of like ghosting into it. I've done designs for Heavenly Father in multiple different scenarios, actually, and for Christ, and he looks different every time. Like, I feel like I like to try to, if I can, try to depict them in a way that's racially ambiguous so that you just can't tell. But the most important thing for me is just the emotion of the end piece, and I feel like a lot of that is in their eyes, which in this one you can't really see their eyes, but
Well, what I like about it is there's almost a hyper masculinity and a hyper femininity that just feels like the most wonderful compliment. They feel so. Of course, you'd see them together. Of course, that would represent the image of God.
That's true. I haven't really thought that, but about this one in particular, I feel like the design that I had for the two of them, I don't know that they would have really felt complete alone.
For sure.
So,
Well, and Adam and Eve, by comparison, look so young and a little naive, and that's a really nice effect.
oh, thanks.
Great. Well, you have another one to show?
Yes,
What a beautiful representation of Eve.
yeah, this one, I did it during 2020 when all the riots were breaking out, and I don't know, I just had a lot of feelings, and I felt, for whatever reason, I thought of Eve, and her decision, like, to partake of the fruit of knowledge of good and evil, and like all of the consequence of that. Like, I feel like a lot of that was what I was feeling, I guess. Sometimes I just, like, living in this world, I'm like, man, there's so much pain. Like, there's so much pain, and yet for whatever reason, like, it was worth doing. And so I think maybe that's why this was the picture that I drew in that moment, was like remembering the moment where our first mother decided that, like, despite all of the pain that it would bring into the world, it was worth, like, partaking of the fruit. It was worth going through those things.
Beautiful concept.
Yeah.
Love it. let's talk a little bit about what you're doing now.
Great.
What are you doing now?
Right now, I'm working remotely for a little studio that's sort of based in Utah. Everyone works remotely for it, but most everyone lives in Utah there. Anyways, it's called Martian Studios, and I've been doing a lot of stuff with Line Upon Line through them.
The YouTube show.
Sorry, with Living Scriptures, Line Upon Line. Yeah. So we wrapped up the New Testament last year, and that was really fun. They had me do the character designs for God and Jesus, which just leads to, like, you know, phrases that you never think you'll say. Like, I was like, are we doing a complete redesign of God? Like, or is it just, you know, like stuff that I'm like, now I'm going to get struck by lightning. But that was a cool experience. Like, I don't know, designing Christ and designing God. And, like, I did a bunch of expression sheets for Christ to give to the animators to try to, like, I don't know, keep from any expressions crossing his face that were, like, not what Christ would do, you know, like, to give them sort of a reference point. But
so let's explain what you're doing for the Line Upon Line YouTube, because there's probably a lot of young people out there that are interested in making content for YouTube. So what's your job?
My job for that project specifically, my job, I do primarily character design and episode directing. So they will send me a script, and they're pretty fast-paced and, like...
Because they're short format videos.
Yeah, they're short format and kind of lower budget. Can I say that?
Sure.
They're low budget. So, so we go as quickly as we can on them. And I get a script, and then I will storyboard it out, kind of scene for scene, write out the animation instructions. I usually, like, draw that on the storyboards, but I also will write it out and have references to which boards they're talking about, and then I have to make a list of all the assets that we need drawn for the episode, and, like, bring in old assets from other episodes, and then we'll assign all those to different members of our team. I usually handle characters, but we'll usually have, like, a character illustrator and a background illustrator and an animator on the episode. And then the sound team, but I don't talk to them. They're so great. I just was like, I can only handle the visual side. But I still send them so many sound notes, so whatever. But yeah, so that's my job.
Great. I love it. I love it. How exciting. Not knowing what's coming in the future, what kind of stuff would you like to do going forward?
I don't know.
Well, I mean, this is the time to fantasize.
That's true.
You don't have to be all responsible and logical or anything.
I'm just laughing because Tom, my boss, is asking me the same thing. He's like,
Yeah.
what do you want to do? Living Scriptures is, like, wrapping up, because they're doing a couple more episodes for the Book of Mormon, but they've already done
They've done
this
the 4
season,
years,
so
yeah.
that project's kind of closing. We've been doing some stuff with another studio for the church, for the Illustrated Doctrine and Covenants. I didn't have to sign an NDA, so I think I'm fine to talk about it. But
Sure. Yeah, well, they've been doing, I mean, they did, they're finishing up the Book of Mormon this year for the new stories version. Is that the thing you're working on for Doctrine and Covenants?
they've been finishing up the Book of Mormon for the stories, like the little cartoon video things.
Well, yeah. Right. So they've got the big images that they have for the text, and then they're using those digital images for the videos.
I believe so.
Okay.
I think that's what I'm working on.
Okay.
For Doctrine and Covenants. And so we've done some that's interesting because it'll go through the pipeline. So somebody will do thumbnails, somebody will take those thumbnails and make them into tight frames, and then somebody else will like do the characters, somebody
Makes
else will
sense
do the
because it's a very
backgrounds.
consistent style.
Yeah, yeah. So I've been doing tight frames and background paintings for those, like alternating some of those and kind of art directing different people from our company to help us have that consistent style. And that's been really fun. The background painting was a little too fun. I emphasized on character design in school, which was so fun. Helped me like empathize with people a lot more than I anticipated. It was actually, my character design class was like Psych 101 but from an artist perspective, I didn't anticipate that. Anyways, but backgrounds are really fun. So I think because it's all like color and lighting and nature, and I love all of those things.
That's great.
So,
Well,
yeah.
wonderful. So glad for you to take the time. Is there anything you would like to tell young or maybe not so young artists out there who are thinking about ways they might be able to share their testimony in using the talents that they've been given?
Yes. Who are thinking about sharing their testimonies. I was said.
Yeah, sharing their testimonies using the gifts they've been given.
I think two things. One is my dad would always say, okay, so three things. My dad would always say, done is better than perfect. So just get it out there. My great grandpa would always say, you're not good enough to beg. So like, you have a gift, share it, don't apologize for it. Just like, we'd love to hear what you have to say, but we don't want to hear your apologies about it. Like, and
I love that.
my sister has been such a good example. A lot of people have, but such a good example to me of sharing her home actually to so many people, regardless of her life's crazy right now. She's got 4 kids and it's a lot going on. And so they invite people into their home regardless of whether or not she's like, I want it to be cleaner. I want it to be nicer. I want it to be all these things, but she just shares it. And honestly, I feel like more inspired because of that. And I feel like so often we especially with artwork, we don't want to put it out unless it's like so perfect. But bearing your testimony, as flawed as it is sometimes more empowering. In fact, probably most of the time it's more empowering than putting out like the most perfect thing because because everybody struggles feeling like they're not good enough. So seeing someone have the courage to be and to share just as they are is really inspiring and probably the best gift that you can give, regardless of what format it's coming in.
Love it.
So,
Thanks, Normandy.
yeah. Yep. I had one other thing. I don't know if it like ties in.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll say it. Maybe you can just.
Film stock is free.
Great.
Yeah.
Perfect. I think the other thing I would say is people say art is super subjective and it's hard to do sustainably because it's like so subjective or whatever. That just means that the context matters. It doesn't mean that there isn't good or bad. Like someone asked me the other day if he was like, I want to know if spending more time on a piece will make it better. And I was like, no, it won't. Like, spending more time on a piece a lot of times can just make it worse. Because good design is decision making. Like, and your decisions are informed by your restraints that you're working with, the art principles, and what you want to do. And so, like, I'm saying that partially because as you go through your life and you're like trying to do art and you don't know how to move forward, like educating yourself so that you can make good decisions is a great place to start, and that'll open up options for you. But I'm also saying it because I feel like if there's one thing I've learned, like the point of this life is it is a creative endeavor, but it's between you and God, and you are the painting. So like as you try to design your life as well, like it's important to be decisive and to make decisions. And John Burton, who's a great painter, said he said you should paint this way, but also live your life this way. I may not be right, but I am certain, and just act. Otherwise, you'll never put down that brushstroke and make that painting. So there you go.
Love it. Thanks, Normandy.
Yeah. Thanks.